A few weeks ago, I posted, "What is your biggest fear when delivering training?" We got a number of interesting replies, a lot of interesting replies, so I thought I'd grab a few out and respond to them individually. This first one's pretty common. You invest energy in putting together and delivering a training only to find out that nobody really got anything out of it. Very, very common fear. There's a couple ways to avoid that happening. One is when you think about the ADDIE process, put the A in ADDIE, the analysis phase, long before you start building a slide deck, long before you start delivering the training, really investing the energy into what is the root cause issue of the problem that's happening that's necessitated the training. What is the skills gap that needs to be addressed? What is the behaviors that are happening or not happening that you'd like to modify or change via the training? What is the outcome, or what does success look like if this is, say, an onboard type training? What is the requirement if it's some sort of certification or compliance type training? But doing all of that work on the front end, really focusing on that long before you even start the design of the session, is really going to help you to have a good, solid training session. Talk to the end users and talk to the frontline managers. That's going to give you even more detail to make your trainings be more effective. The other thing you can think about doing is at the beginning of the session, before you even dive in, you share the session objective, what are the participants hoping to get out of the session, etc., and ask them explicitly, what do you know about this subject right now? What do you know about this subject right now? Because if you ask that, you will find out either the participants have a lot of experience with this topic or they're at ground zero. You'll know at what end of the spectrum they are. And by doing that, you can then really tailor and address your information. So analysis, and ask them at the very beginning of the session. Another very common fear of training is that your participants will ask you a question and you won't know the answer to it. My response to that's very straightforward. Who cares? You're not expected to know every answer to every question underneath the sun. Now, yes, you want to have a certain level of confidence, competency, knowledge. You're expected to know a lot of different things, but you're not going to know every detail to every single question that you could potentially be asked. So if you don't know something, who cares? It's what you do with it, I think, that's important. Number one, really taking that opportunity to understand, why is that participant asking that? Is there something deeper going on there? Is there some avenue that you could explore or you could mine out of that participant's question that's useful to everybody else in the room? Or is this just sort of a one-off procedural yes, no, basic type question? The other thing that I think that's important is that you're just honest about it. I don't know. First time I've been asked that, or I don't know. I forgot the answer, or I don't know. Let me think for a second. And then you get to the third part, which is either you try to work together in the moment to get an answer for that participant, kind of navigate through, or you just table it for later. Put it up on an idea board, maybe on a Post-it note, slap it on right in the room where everybody can see it so you don't forget. And then most importantly, you go find the answer to that question. But ultimately, if you get asked a question you don't know the answer to, big whoop-de-doo. That's part of being a trainer. You don't know everything. Here's a fairly easy one. Follow me on LinkedIn, No Boring Training, and follow my YouTube channel. It's going to give you a ton of different ideas to make your training more interesting so that it can be more effective. The number one thing that I can recommend is don't just do lecture-based training, presentation-based training. It's horribly boring, and the reality is the retention rates are pretty low from that. But follow me, I'll take care of you, give you lots of ideas to make your training interesting. A super common fear when you're delivering training is that technical difficulties will happen and it will wreck your session. And yes, that's very common. And that's very common to happen too, especially when you're doing virtual sessions or you're doing any sort of session where there's a piece of technology involved. You pretty much count on something not working, something failing. How do you deal with that? Well, this person has answered their own question. Test everything ahead of time. Test it, test it, test it. The other thing is, don't have a single point of failure. So don't have your PowerPoint presentation also be your speaker notes and also be the only thing that helps you stay on track. Because once that presentation goes kablooey, you don't know what to do. So think about all of the aspects, your audio, your visual, your presentation, the room environment, all of the different aspects of your training that rely on technology, and try to set it up so there's no single point of failure, that if that fails, the whole thing's done. You want to set it up so if something fails, and it will, that you can just simply pivot to some alternate delivery, some alternate plan. Also, think about PACE planning. Google it, PACE, primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency planning. Have those levels of backups. That'll keep you on track in case something goes wrong. Oh yeah, this is one that trainers don't like. Ask a question and just get back from the participants. It's no fun. A number of different things you can do to build an environment where people feel confident to speak up. Number one, don't do presentation-based training. That's, first of all, presentations are good for conveying information, not necessarily the greatest methodology for training. You're given a great speech, but you're not necessarily guiding somebody to knowledge. So lay off the presentation-based training. Give the participants room to talk in the first place. I think the other thing to think about is creating a safe environment, really going out of your way to create an environment where participants feel comfortable to speak up. Now, you can do this in one way by setting the expectation that they will talk at some point throughout that session. You're going to need participation and you expect that participation. I think that builds sort of a confidence level that, hey, this is going to be a different type of training. The other thing is, I think you being vulnerable as the trainer. If you're training on a procedure or something, share a time where maybe you made a mistake with the procedure, or you witnessed somebody skipping over steps of the procedure and the negative outcomes that came from that. But you being real about sort of your experience with the topics. I think another thing that really helps for participants to speak up is structuring your session so that they are talking as soon as humanly possible. That could be from the second they walk in the door, you're asking them questions. How are you doing? How have you been? What are you hoping to get out of this session? What's your experience? You know, it's just those little quick sort of conversational type things. Doesn't have to be very long. Your opening session really should be structured around the participants talking, not necessarily you talking. And then really make sure that it's participation heavy on the front end. If you're going to do introductions, have a group breakout session, get everybody talking, and then have them come back and everybody introduces everybody else. It's getting them talking right off the bat. So there's a whole bunch of different things you can do to create that environment to get them talking right away. Yeah, difficult trainees, they cause you to earn your money as a trainer, that's for sure. The real question is, why are they difficult? If they're doing well and they're absorbing the information, they're just difficult because they're sort of challenging you, or it's their personality type, or maybe they're asking, why does the organization do it this way or that way? As long as they're on track and they're demonstrating knowledge, they're hitting all the performance criteria, and they're on their way to meeting the session objective, suck it up and deal. You know, some people are just, you're not going to necessarily gel with. Now, if they're starting to be disruptive, that's a different story. And then you have to use your trainer voice to make sure you're keeping the session on track, because you have a responsibility to the entire group, not just this one person who's maybe trying to dominate everything. That's where maybe you can bring in some leadership structures. You can pull that individual out, maybe have a one-on-one chat. You can do some different things. But as long as they're not being disruptive, let them be difficult. The real question becomes, are they being difficult because they're not understanding the information? And that kind of falls into two buckets. If they are not understanding the information, have we done everything we can do as trainers to help them to understand it? Have we done one-on-one sessions, breakout sessions, gone to extraordinary measures? Have we done some one-on-one coaching? Have we evaluated why are they not understanding it? Have we set up sort of a sideline action plan, et cetera, et cetera? In that case, be careful that that individual is not starting to bog the rest of the group down, and you want to meet that individual's needs because it's our job to help them. We have a duty to help them, but we can't let it slow down the rest of the class. So it's kind of a fine line, and you have to kind of have some sideline conversations with that individual to say, hey, we're going to meet your needs. We're going to give you everything you need. We're going to help you through this, but here's what I need from you. So we're not slowing the whole thing down. Now, the other part of that not understanding it difficulty is they're not understanding it, and they're never going to understand it. And no matter what we do, they're just not going to meet the performance criterion for the job role or meet the session objective. They're just bound and determined to be disruptive, whatever, but they're just willfully not wanting to get with the program, or they're just not able to absorb and grasp the information. It's an unfortunate, sad reality of being in the training business, especially if you're doing any sort of onboarding training for an organization. For those individuals, get your management structure involved right away. Have very clear, crystal clear, short, measurable, quantitative milestones documented ahead of time, so that when you bring the management structure in, you can say, here's our red flag behaviors, and they've done X, Y, Z, A, B, and C. And then you bring in the management structures to deal with those individuals. So it's a lot more complicated a subject than this couple-minute reply, but hopefully that gives some helpful pointers. So there you have it. There's a quick feedback on common fears related to delivering training. If you want some more tips and practical advice, follow me here on LinkedIn, ring the bell, and you'll get daily updates. Or you can go to my YouTube channel, search out No Boring Training, and you can get longer form versions, more ideas there as well.